I want you to look at two watermelons sitting side by side on a picnic table in July. Same size, same store, same price. One of them is going to be the kind of watermelon you remember for 3 weeks. The kind that drips down your chin before the knife is even off the board. Cold, dense, almost burgundy red in the center. So sweet it tastes like someone stirred in a spoonful of sugar. The other one is going to be pale, pink, mealy at the edges, watery where it should be sweet, and it is going to sit in your refrigerator half-eaten until you finally throw it out on Wednesday. $8. Gone. And you will not know which one you bought until you cut it open in your kitchen.
That is the problem most Americans have with
watermelon in the summer. They walk into a Walmart or a Kroger, they stand in front of a bin full of green striped melons, and they have no real system. Maybe they knock on it. Maybe they look for something yellow on the bottom. Maybe they just grab the biggest one in the pile. And maybe 1 in 3 times they end up with something worth eating. The rest of the time they end up disappointed.
I am Elmer. My family has been growing food on the same ground
in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, for more generations than I have fingers to count on. My grandfather grew watermelons. His father grew them. My father could walk through a patch at the end of July and tell you within a day or two which melon was ready and which one needed another week. He never tapped one in his life. He did not need to. He knew what to look for. He learned it the way everything on a farm gets learned. By watching, by handling, by getting it wrong a few times early on, and paying attention to why. Now I want you to sit with this for a moment. What I am going to show you in the next few minutes is not one trick. It is a complete system. 7 things you look at in a specific order, each one either confirming or disqualifying the melon in your hands. You will do it in under 60 seconds per melon. And you will stop wasting $8 on fruit that tastes like wet cardboard. I am also going to explain exactly why grocery store watermelons disappoint you as often as they do. Not because I want to make you angry. Just because once you understand the shape of the thing, the system makes perfect sense. And at the end, I will tell you about the one sign that almost nobody checks anymore. The sign my father called the most honest thing on a watermelon. The sign the vine leaves behind when it is done with a melon and ready to let it go. That one will surprise you. We have a small book that Esther put together on the old home saving system, the way Amish families stretch resources without giving anything up. The link is in the description if you want it. Now, before I give you the system, I need to explain one thing, one principle, because without it, the rest of the system is just a list of tips you read somewhere. With it, everything clicks into place. A watermelon does not ripen after you pick it. That sounds simple, but most people have not truly absorbed what it means. You buy a banana that is still a little green, you leave it on the counter, 3 days later it is perfect. You buy a peach that is firm and tart, you wait, it softens. These are what botanists call climacteric fruits. They keep producing sugars after the stem is cut. They respond to ethylene gas. They ripen on your counter, on your shelf, in your fruit bowl. A watermelon is not that fruit. Watermelon is what they call non-climacteric. The moment the vine is cut, everything stops. The sugar content that the melon has on the day it leaves the field is the sugar content it is going to have when you eat it. There is no improving it at home. There is no leaving it on the counter to get sweeter. What you see in the store is what you get, which means the entire game of selecting a watermelon is about finding the one that stayed on the vine the longest before it was harvested. Because Brix levels, the measure of sugar in the flesh, increase every single day, the melon is still connected to that vine. A melon pulled at 11 Brix is decent. A melon pulled at 13 Brix is the one your kids talk about. A melon pulled at 8 Brix, picked early because a commercial operation needed it firm enough to survive 3 days in a refrigerated truck, tastes like nothing. Think of the vine as a pump, a slow, constant pump running underneath the soil, pulling minerals and water and sugars up through the root system, through the stem, and directly into that melon. Every day the vine runs, the melon gets denser, sweeter, heavier. The flesh develops that deep granular texture, almost crystalline, that snaps when you bite it instead of going soft and grainy. Then one day, the vine decides it is finished. The tendril dries, the connection slows, the melon is done. That is the moment you want. That is the melon you are looking for in the bin. The problem is that most commercial watermelons never reach that moment on the vine. They are pulled before the vine is ready to release them, because a firm, slightly underripe melon ships better, bruises less, and lasts longer in a store cooler. The vine did not choose to release that melon. A harvesting crew chose to cut it, and once that stem is cut, the pump stops. The sugar that was still building in the flesh will never come. What you get is a melon that looks fine on the outside, sometimes beautiful, dark green and glossy, no soft spots, no blemishes, and tastes like summer rain on concrete. The people who figure out how to pick a good watermelon in a modern grocery store are essentially trying to read the difference between a melon the vine chose to release and a melon a commercial harvester chose to cut. And most of the time, that difference is still written on the outside of the fruit. You just have to know where to look and in what order. Here is the system. 7 checks, in order. The first check is the skin. Pick up a melon and look at the surface. Run your hand across it. A ripe watermelon has a dull, matte exterior. Not shiny, not polished looking. When a watermelon is still growing, the outer rind reflects light. As it ripens fully, that outer layer changes. It loses the sheen. A melon that still has a high gloss, that catches the grocery store light and bounces it back at you, was likely cut before its time. Set it down. The dullest melon in the bin is almost always the ripest melon in the bin. This one step alone will eliminate a third of the melons in front of you before you touch anything else. The second check is the weight. Pick the melon up in both hands. Watermelons are 92% water when fully ripe. An underripe melon is still building its internal water content. A fully ripe melon is dense, heavy. It should feel heavier than you expect for its size. The best way to test this is to pick up 2 melons of similar size and hold them one in each hand. The heavier one is almost always the riper one. You can practice this in about 30 seconds. Your hands will learn the difference faster than you think. The third check is the field spot. Turn the melon over and find the patch where it rested on the ground while it grew. Every watermelon has one. If the melon sat on the earth long enough, that spot where no sunlight reaches will turn yellow. The longer the melon stayed on the vine, the yellower and deeper in color that spot gets. A creamy butter yellow, almost the color of a manila folder, is what you are looking for. Dark golden yellow is even better. A pale or white field spot means the melon was picked too early, before it had time to develop that deep contact with the ground, before the vine was ready to release it. University researchers at Texas A&M have confirmed that field spot color correlates directly with internal sugar development. The skin over that field spot loses chlorophyll as the melon ripens, and what you see shifting from white to yellow to gold is essentially the visible record of how long that melon stayed on the vine. White means they cut it too soon. Butter yellow means it was close. Deep gold means the vine made the decision, not the harvester. The fourth check is the stripe width. This one went viral a few years back. A farmer shared it on Facebook, and it ended up getting 28 million views on TikTok, which tells you how hungry people are for real information about this. Hold 2 fingers together, your index and middle finger, and place them side by side against the rind between 2 dark green stripes. Find the lighter green band between the dark stripes and measure it with your fingers. If that lighter band is at least 2 fingers wide, the melon has expanded fully on the vine. As a watermelon grows and ripens, the rind stretches. The stripes stretch apart. The lighter bands between them widen. A melon with narrow stripe spacing was small when it was cut, which usually means it was cut early. A melon with wide spacing has expanded to full ripeness. 2 fingers width between the dark stripes is the minimum you are looking for. This test is free, it is fast, and it requires nothing but your hand. That is 4 checks done. You have eliminated the shiny melons, the light melons, the ones with white field spots, and the ones with narrow stripes. Now we are getting into the details. The 5th check is the blossom end. Every watermelon has 2 ends. One is where the stem was attached. The other is the blossom end, the bottom of the fruit opposite the stem, where the flower that started the whole thing was. Press the blossom end gently with your thumb, just a gentle, steady press. On a fully ripe melon, that end will give slightly, just a little. A small, gentle give. Not soft, not spongy, not rotting, but not rock hard either. A slight spring, like the flesh just underneath, has reached full maturity and has a little flex to it. An underripe melon will feel like you are pushing on a rubber ball, hard all the way through. No give at all. That little bit of flex at the blossom end is the melon telling you, with its own texture, that it is ready. My grandfather never used this check in the store. He used it in the field, walking the patch with his hands. Same principle applies. The 6th check is the smell. Bring the blossom end of the melon close to your nose. A ripe watermelon has a subtle, sweet green fragrance right at that end. Not strong, not perfumed, just a faint, clean sweetness that sits in the air around it. An underripe melon smells like almost nothing, a rind, a hint of vegetation. If you smell nothing, set it down. If you smell something sweet and faintly fruity, that is a good sign. Do not skip this check because you feel self-conscious about smelling a watermelon in the grocery store. Every person in that produce section who has ever eaten a melon worth eating has done exactly this. Now, the seventh check. This is the one most people skip entirely. This is the one my father called the only honest part of a commercial watermelon, because it cannot be faked, it cannot be polished up, it cannot be waxed to look better than it is. And in a produce section full of melons selected partly for how well they travel and how long they last in a cooler, this one thing still tells the truth about what happened on the vine. Look at the dried stem scar on the end where the fruit attached to the vine. Not the blossom end, the stem end. There will be a small, round, circular mark there, slightly indented, where the melon was cut from the plant. Look at the size of that circle. Then look at how tight, how closed, how clenched it appears. A small, tight, dry, clenched stem scar means the melon spent a long time on the vine before it was cut. The flower that produced that fruit came and went, and the connection between vine and melon slowly, naturally narrowed as the season ran its course. A large, open, wet-looking scar means that melon was cut while the stem was still thick and green and full, which means the vine was still actively running, which means the melon was not done. The smaller and tighter and drier that circle, the longer the vine held onto that melon before it was harvested. This is the check that connects back to the fundamental principle I told you about at the beginning. The vine is a pump that runs until the fruit is done. When the melon is fully ripe, the connection between vine and melon naturally begins to close. In the field, if you waited long enough, the tendril nearest the melon would dry up and turn brown, and the melon would almost release itself. Commercial operations never wait that long. But the stem scar still carries the evidence. How thick was that connection when the melon was cut? How complete was the vine's investment in that fruit when someone decided the season was done? A small, dry, tight scar is as close as you can get in a grocery store to finding a melon the vine was ready to let go. Now I want you to understand who profits from you not knowing this system. Not to make you angry. I am not one for conspiracy thinking. But the shape of the thing is worth understanding because once you see it everywhere. A commercially grown watermelon in the United States today typically travels between 500 and 1,000 miles from field to store. It spends 2 or 3 days in refrigerated transit. It sits in a produce section for another 2 or 3 days. For a melon to survive that journey and still look presentable on the shelf, it needs to be firm. Firmness in a watermelon correlates directly with how early it was picked. A fully ripe melon, the kind with the deep gold field spot and the tight stem scar, would not survive 4 days in a truck without developing soft spots and bruising on arrival. So the commercial watermelon supply chain has a built-in incentive to pull melons early. Not because anyone is scheming against you, just because the economics of a refrigerated supply chain favor firmness over flavor. And firmness is almost always the opposite of what your tongue wants when you bite into a slice in August. At Walmart right now, a whole seedless watermelon runs about $8.47. A personal-sized one runs $4.48. Most Americans buy 3 or 4 watermelons between June and September. That is $25 to $35 a summer on melon. If 1 in 3 of those melons disappoints you, that is $8 to $12 a summer on produce that ends up in the trash or the compost pile. Not a fortune. But it is money spent on something that should be simple. The irony is that the information needed to pick a better watermelon is older than the supermarket. My grandmother knew it. The farm wives at the Lancaster County produce stands knew it. You could buy a melon from a produce stand in 1950 from a woman who had grown it herself, and she would turn it over and show you the field spot before she let you put it in your basket. She was not hiding anything. She was proud of it. She wanted you to come back next week. That knowledge did not disappear because it became a secret. It disappeared because the people selling melons stopped having any stake in whether you enjoyed one. The supply chain grew long enough that the farmer in Georgia and the customer in Ohio never meet. The incentive to pick at peak ripeness went away. And the knowledge about how to read a ripe melon from the outside, knowledge that any produce stand farmer used to volunteer for free, slowly stopped being passed on because nobody selling the fruit had any reason to teach it. I am not telling you anyone schemed this in a back room. Nobody had to. It is worse than a conspiracy because it is a system nobody had to coordinate. It simply pays better to sell a firm, early cut melon that travels well and photographs nicely than to teach someone how to identify the difference between 8 bricks and 13 bricks on the outside of the fruit. The education would cost the supply chain nothing, but it would give the customer the ability to leave the bin empty-handed, and that is a problem for produce managers. So here is what I want you to do this week, the next time you are standing in front of a bin of watermelons in the summer. First, do not touch the shiny ones. Any melon with a high-gloss exterior goes back. You are only looking at the matte ones. Second, pick up 2 melons of similar size and compare the weight. Take the heavier one. Third, turn it over and find the field spot. You are looking for deep butter yellow, close to gold. If it is white or pale green, set it down. It was picked too early, and no amount of counter time is going to change that. Fourth, hold 2 fingers against the rind and measure the spacing between the dark stripes. 2 fingers width minimum in the lighter bands between the stripes. Fifth, press gently on the blossom end. You want a slight give, not soft, not mushy, just a small, gentle spring. Sixth, smell the blossom end. You are looking for a faint, clean sweetness. If it smells like nothing, the sugar content is likely low. Seventh, and most important, flip it back to the stem end. Find the small circular scar where the vine attached. The smaller, tighter, and drier that scar, the longer the vine held onto that melon. That is the one check that is hardest to fake and tells you the most truth about what happened before harvest. Run through all 7. Any melon that passes all 7 checks is worth buying. Any melon that fails more than 2 of them, set it down and look at the next one. In most grocery store bins, particularly in peak season from June through August when domestic melons are in rotation, you will find at least 2 or 3 that pass. Pick the best one. Take it home. Put it in the refrigerator for a couple of hours before you cut it. Cut it open at the center. What you will see, if you follow the system, is flesh that is deep burgundy red, not pale pink, dense, with a slightly crystalline texture you can see in the way the light catches it. The center should look almost heavy with juice. The first bite should have a snap to it, a clean, firm break, followed by sweetness that is immediate and deep, not the thin, watery sweetness of an underripe melon, but a full, layered sweetness that lasts for a moment after you swallow. That is a 13 bricks melon. That is a melon the vine was almost ready to release when it was cut. That is what a watermelon is supposed to taste like. I read every comment that comes in on these videos. I mean that. Tell me where you are in the country, because region matters with watermelon. Florida and Georgia melons earlier in the summer tend to be different from Texas Rio Grande Valley melons. Tell me whether you buy from a grocery chain or from a farm stand or from a farmer's market, and whether the system changed anything for you the first time you tried it. Your experience is useful to other people watching this who are in your same region, standing in front of the same bins. Next week, I am going to talk about cantaloupe. And cantaloupe has a test even more reliable than the stem scar on a watermelon, because cantaloupe gives off a signal that is impossible to miss if you know what you are smelling for. Even a grocery store cantaloupe, even one picked slightly early, will tell you within a day or 2 when it is ready. The vine wrote that instruction right into the skin of the fruit. We are going to go through it completely. Esther always said the land is generous with people who pay attention to it. I think that is true of the fruit the land produces as well. It is not hiding anything. It has been telling you the same story since the seed went in the ground. You just have to learn the language.